Hello everyone and welcome to another Total Education Centre lecture. My name is Bruce Pattinson. I'd like to remind you that these lectures are brought to you free, so if you'd like to help us out, please press the like button below, leave a comment, any questions you have we're happy to answer. Don't forget to visit our website totaleducationcentre.com.au. Here you'll find lots of educational resources for you to use. If you're a teacher, there are teaching units on this topic. There are also student lecture notes on this topic that add to the discussions that we're having here. We hope you enjoy this lecture and you're looking forward to it. Thank you. Hi, I'm Bruce Pattinson from Total Education Centre, and tonight we're going to talk about Wilfred Owen's Strange Meeting. Strange Meeting was possibly the last poem that Owen wrote, and there's some contention over the final wording of the poem, but we're going to go with one that you'll be studying. It captures all of Owen's thoughts about war, and it's a sort of long, wide-ranging poem. It takes us from the chaos and ugliness of the front lines to the soldier's mind and a conversation with the dead soldier in hell and the ramifications of all that. And finally, in the end of the poem, there's nothing left. There's no value in war at all. And I think this poem's one of Owen's best poems, and Dulcet Decorum Est is often, as I described in the lecture on that poem, one of his most famous. But I think this one's probably my favourite and the best of it. We'll begin again with a reading of the poem and then we'll move into some analysis. Strange Meeting. It seemed that out of battle I escaped down some profound dull tunnel long since scooped through granite which titanic wars had groined. Yet also there encumbered sleepers groaned, too fast in thought or deaf to be stirred. Then, as I probed them, one sprang up and stared with piteous recognition in fixed eyes, lifting distressful hands as if to bless, and by his smile I knew that sullen hall. By his dead smile I knew we stood in hell. With 1,000 pains that vision's face was grained, yet no blood reached there from the upper ground, and no guns thumped or down the flues made moan. Strange friend, I said, here is no cause to mourn. None, said that other, save the undone years, the hopelessness. Whatever hope is yours was my life also. I went hunting wild after the wildest beauty in the world, which lies not calm in eyes or braided hair, but mocks the steady running of the hour. And if it grieves richlier than here, for by my glee might many men have laughed, and of my weeping somehow had been left, which must die now. I mean the truth untold, the pity of war, the pity war distilled. Now men will go content with what we spoiled, or discount, boil bloody and be spilled. They will be swift with swiftness of the tigress. None will break ranks, though nations trek from progress. Courage was mine, and I had mystery. Wisdom was mine, and I had mastery. To miss the march of this retreating world into vain citadels that are not walled. Then, when much blood had clogged their chariot wheels, I would go up and wash them from sweet wells. Even with truths that lie too deep for taint, I would have poured my spirit without stint, but not through wounds, not on the cess of war. Foreheads of men have bled where no wounds were. I am the enemy you killed, my friend. I knew you in this dark, for so you frowned. Yesterday, through me as you jabbed and killed, I parried, but my hands were loath and cold. Let us sleep now. Well, Strange Meeting, of course, is quite a complex and lengthy poem, and it really is my favourite poem of Owen's because it covers so much territory, and everybody gets stuck on the phrase, as I was suggesting in the other poems, the pity of war near the end of the poem, but concentrate also on the other areas. And this poem is one I'd recommend if you can really get into it and understand it. It's well worth writing about in the HSC or whatever exam you're studying it for. I'd really like to do some contextual work with this poem for you now. And I'm going to read from the Penguin Book of First World War Poetry, and it'll set Strange Meeting up within its context of Owen's philosophy, and probably you can think about this and include it in his life when you write about the poem. Owen writes to his mother, "Thus you see how pure Christianity will not fit in with pure patriotism," Owen tells his mother in a letter dated May in 1917. "The problem isn't much different, and it's intractable. If you believe something is wrong, you cannot, out of tolerance or any other mode, convince yourself that it's right. We aren't dealing here with logic, for belief operates in that area of human feeling where thinking has cooperated with it to produce assent or dissent. In other words, for Owen, killing was wrong. Am I not myself a conscientious objector with a very seared conscience? He wrote in the same letter. And that was a conflict we see in the poems of Owen, that he's fighting but he doesn't really want to and doesn't believe in the killing. This is the nub of Owen's poetry, from which the compassion flows. Compassion is the blood that issues from the wound, and the wound is caused by our soldiering. In Strange Meeting, the compassion significantly is reserved not for the soldiers of his own side, but for the enemy he has killed. And there cannot be two ways about this. You may kill for pay, or because you are told to. You can enlist because the other poets, like Ezra Pound, believe it best for you. You may do it in order to survive, but you may not do it out of hatred or from bloodlust. But the motives do not change the nature of the act. And for Owen, killing was wrong. And those words to his mother describes the conflict that he had, and this conflict comes through in Strange Meeting. There are, of course, some terms and terminology in Strange Meeting that you'll need to deal with, and some of the language is a little bit archaic, especially in the 21st century when you consider this was written, right at the start of the last century. There are some terms like break ranks in it, which are it's a military term, which is to leave your post or break away from the position where you're supposed to be. There's words like this retreating world, and the context in that phrase describes the world thinks it's marching to something useful, but it's actually retreating. The word Titanic, of course, doesn't refer to the boat that sunk and the movie of the same. He talks about the Titans, the mythical children of the two ancient Greek gods that held up the world, strength, size, and intellect, and how things were explained and destroyed during a war similar to this act of war. The terminology you can look up, you can come to deal with, but we need to really talk about what happens in this poem and a little bit about it. I think you'll find that the poem becomes clearer as it goes along, and really he just goes down to hell to meet the person that is killed in the war before, and that's probably the simplest way. And in modern English poets, they talk about Strange Meeting, and they say this: Strange Meeting is Owen's last poem and has long been recognised as his greatest and perhaps the finest English war poem of the century. One may regret, as Yeats did, the outworn poeticism of things like Titanic wars and chariot wheels, but the lapses are not serious or frequent enough to mar the work as a whole. The poem shows, in fact, the positive side of Owen's romantic inheritance. The meeting with an alter ego is a typically romantic obsession, and so too is the vision of the poet as a prophet and a teacher. And he says in the poem, I would go up and wash them from sweet wells, even with truths that lie too deep for taint. This exalted concept of the poetic mission distinguishes Owen from his other contemporaries, Sassoon, Blunden or Graves, who all set themselves more limited objectives. Without this moral incentive, one feels he could hardly have written as he did. And Strange Meeting is an encapsulation of what I was reading to you earlier about the conflict that he has about the killing and that the unnecessary nature of war and all the loss that occurs around it. I think with Strange Meeting you need to think about not just the narrative of it, but the overall effect and some of the interpretations that there have been. And you can find great detail on the internet, but really what it boils down to is that the madness of war and the confusion and hysteria that it feels, he tries to maintain a spiritual life in all that. And when if mankind's spiritual life is destroyed and killed, as he says at the end, everything is in total hopelessness. There's nothing left for anybody and nothing left at all. It's a long poem. There are a few rhyming lines in the poem. The lines don't end in words. They've been grouped in pairs. It's the tone of the poem changes through the poem. We have some levels of description, then we have personal insight, then we have psychology, then we have the big philosophical analysis at the end of the poem. It's important to think about what feelings the poem arouses in you. Would you have been moved by that poem? would you have done something about that? How would it have made you feel at the time? And that will give you some sort of thesis that you can develop when you want to talk about strange meaning and how it happens. That's really all about time we have for, and I know that's a very brief overview of a very complex poem, but we can, if you want to write in, we can go into another lecture on this and talk about very specifically just the language of the poem and do the analysis that way. I think this is a poem that you should write about. I think it's a poem that you can get into, and I think it's a poem that is very worthwhile, and it certainly is one of Owen's, and I think it's better than Dulcet Decorum Est. I think it's an outstanding poem and one that's a real guide into Owen's soul and what he wants to say with his poetry. I'm Bruce Pattinson, and really that's all we have time for in this tonight's lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from that poem, from the analysis of the poem. I know you'll learn something from the poem. Don't forget, ask any questions. Feel free. Visit us at our website. We have plenty to offer there. And good night.